We're going to now look at solving problems using either sine or cosine law, and we have to be able to determine which we're going to use. So we're going to focus on deciding whether to use sine law or cosine law to solve a problem, and then once we've decided on which to use, on solving that problem. Okay, so this is a multiple choice you could possibly see on a test or assignment. Which equation can you use to find the size of angle A in triangle ABC? So angle A is up here. So we're looking to find how big that is. What information do we have in this triangle? Well, I have this side right here, I have this side right here, and I have this angle. So what I end up seeing is that I have an SSA triangle when I check my sides, or check my parts in order. So if I'm going in a clockwise fashion, I have a side, then another side, then an angle. So it's an SSA triangle. Which of my ratios can I use to find a missing angle using if I have a side, and an angle? That would be the sine law. So in other words, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my sine law to find angle A. So to do that, I have sine of my angle, which I don't know, divided by the opposite side, which is 34, is equal to the sine of 30 degrees, which I know, divided by its opposite side, which is 70. So I definitely am not going to be able to use C because it's a cosine law. D is a poor attempt at a cosine law set up. So I'm either going to be doing A or B. They're both sine law. But notice that in A, I've got my two sides mixed up. So my answer is going to be B, which is exactly the same as what I have figured out on my own without even looking at my answers first, my possibilities. So my angle A and its opposite side is 34. My angle, I'm calling it just 30 degrees right now. The opposite side is 70. So angle B is opposite side is 70. So that's the one I'm going to use. It doesn't ask me to find it. It just asks me which ratio, which equation can I use to find it. And I have figured that out. Okay, a triangular garden is to be fenced. The carpenter needs to know the perimeter of the garden to estimate the length of wood needed, but some measurements in the diagram are missing. Determine the measure of angle Q. And what is the total length of wood needed for the fence? Round your answer to 1 decimal place. So we're going to look at these two questions separately, and we're going to combine them. So the first one is the measure of angle Q. So I want to determine the measure of angle Q. So I'm looking for this angle right here. I know a side, then the next piece of information I know is a side, and the last piece of information I know is an angle. So much like in the last question, I have a side-side angle triangle. When I have a side-side angle triangle, I'm going to use sine law. So I don't know if you can make out, that does say angle Q, by the way. It's that part of the angle symbol is a little faint. Sine of 65 degrees divided by its opposite side, which is 7, is equal to sine of my unknown angle, Q, divided by its opposite side, which is 6. So I've got it set up properly. Now what I got to do is get sine Q by itself. So to do that, the easiest way is to cross multiply. So I get 6 sine 65 degrees is equal to 7 sine q. Now I'm going to divide both sides by 7, so I get sine q by itself. So 6 sine 65 degrees over 7 is equal to sine q. So I now have sine q. What I need next is to find q. In order to do that, I'm looking for a missing angle. I'm going to need to do the inverse sine. So what I'm going to get, I'm actually going to try to make this a little easier to visualize. I'm going to calculate what 6 sine 65 divided by 7 is. So on my calculator, I can type in exactly as I see it. Make sure your calculator is in degrees, little d or DEG at the top of your display. Or if it's a graphing calculator, mode, and then make sure degree is highlighted. So 6 times sine 65 divided by 7, I get works out to 0.7768. Okay, so to get q, I'm going to have to get the inverse sine of 0.7768. So on my calculator, I hit the second function button, then I hit sine, then I type in 0.7768, and it tells me to the nearest angle that q is equal to 51 degrees. So angle q is 51 degrees. Okay, now I know that. So the second part of my question was, what is the total length of wood needed? So if this is 51 degrees, I need to know the total amount of wood needed to make this triangular fence. So I'm missing little r. Now, what you may notice is that I have 2 angles and 2 sides right now. Whether I'm using sine law or cosine law, I'm going to need to know the measure of angle r. So I'm going to start by finding that out. So angle r is equal to 180 degrees. I should write that down. R equals 180 degrees minus 65 degrees minus 51 degrees. So I type that into my calculator. And it tells me that angle r is equal to 64 degrees. Okay, so now knowing angle r, I have 5 parts of my triangle. The only thing I'm missing is side r. So it doesn't matter if I want to use sine law or cosine law. I'm going to show you using both that it doesn't matter. We can find the length of little r. So I'm going to start with doing sine law. So r over sine of the opposite angle, 64 degrees, is equal to 7 over 65, or sine of 65, apologies. Try that again. Okay, so I'll write that out again. So it's sine of 64, r over sine 64 is equal to 7 over sine 65. So I'm going to cross multiply. So r times sine 65 degrees is equal to 7 times sine 64 degrees. So r is equal to, divide both sides by sine 65. So r is equal to 7 sine 64 degrees over sine 65 degrees. And with my calculator, I can type that in exactly as I see it. So 7 times sine 64 divided by sine 65 gives me r is equal to 6.9. I'm going to do the exact same measurement. Now this is using cosine, or sorry, using sine. I got r is equal to 6.9. Using cosine, I should be able to get the exact same number. So for cosine, r squared is equal to 6 squared plus 7 squared minus 2 times 6 times 7. The two sides that I use are the other ones besides r. The r I don't know. I do know the other two. So I fill those numbers in my cosine law. And I also have to have the angle opposite r, which is, in this case, 64 degrees. So using cosine law, I can type that in exactly as I see it on my calculator. 6 squared plus 7 squared minus 2 times 6 times 7 times cos 64 degrees. Tells me that r squared is equal to 48.2. To get r, I'm going to need to get the square root of 48.2. So r is equal to square root of 48.2, which once again works out to be exactly, well, not exactly, it works out to be 6.9. It's 6.94 and a bunch of other numbers, but whether I'm using sine law or cosine law, I'm getting r to be exactly the same number, 6.9. So if I want to find the total length of wood needed for this fence, I'm going to have to add up all three sides of my fence. So total amount of wood is equal to 7 meters plus 6 meters plus my 6.9 meters. So I add them together, and I'm going to need, to the nearest decimal place, 19.9 meters of wood. So 19.9 meters is needed for the fence. Doesn't matter whether I use sine law or cosine law here. When I'm only missing one single piece from my triangle, either one will work. So to summarize, when solving for missing values in triangles, it is possible to use either the sine law or the cosine law, depending on the information you're given. So we can use the sine law when we have an AAS triangle, an angle, and an opposite side, an angle, a contained side, and another angle, so AAS or ASA, or if we have a side, another side, and one of the opposite angles, an SSA triangle. For cosine law, that's useful when we have an SAS triangle, a side with a contained angle and another side, or an SSS triangle, which is all three sides. And we must identify the known parts and our unknown parts to decide which law to use. And we've seen a couple of times now that sometimes it doesn't matter whether we use sine law or cosine law, but we're still going to end up with the same answer in either case.